Keishla, welcome to Mastering CS, Candid Leader Insights. Considering the highs and lows of 2023, how would you describe the year for customer success? Any particular challenges that you faced last year?
Absolutely. Like all professions, customer success had to deal with the different economic shifts and challenges. Some organizations were dealt tougher blows. And I think we're in a really interesting spot because in 2020, the entire world was sort of turned on its head. And in many ways, it still is. But I think that everybody in their organizations, as CS especially, because I think there was an expansion of CS during that time, are really searching for their footing and really trying to figure out where they stand. And so in CS orgs, like mine included, we are continuing to navigate different shifts and changes of what our customers need. So many customers made decisions in 2020 based off of responding to the pandemic and are now responding to flushes of funding in response to the pandemic. And now they're really taking a step back, evaluating their needs. And so CS orgs are having to figure out what that landscape looks like, depending on the organization. Organizations are trying to figure out what remote, hybrid, and in-person work looks like during this time, and that's impacting the technology that they're choosing to use. And so they're having a process of reevaluating. And in the space that I work in, largely in the higher ed space, there's a lot of reevaluation of the tools they've been using, the processes they've been going through. And so if I could sum up CS in a few words in 2023, it would be most orgs, and I'm included in that, we were really trying to get clear on the role. What are we supposed to be doing with our time based on our product so that we can focus on purpose and value realization for our partners, both externally, our paying partners, and our internal partners as well, within the org, to make sure that we're communicating well how we're impacting what is happening in their businesses.
What is one thing you would do differently this year in customer success?
So obviously, I wish that every person that was impacted by the economic uncertainty, the layoffs, are something that I wish everybody had a different experience. But, I function in a lot of different CS communities, which I'm a member, and I hear the stories of people who are still searching for roles, and I hope that they find their space. As for my work as a CS leader, I don't necessarily live in a space of what would I rewrite or do differently, because I think that CS is iterative work, that you're dealing with things in the moment, and plans and processes should be up for review and refinement. And that was what 2022 was for me. I started my role in 2021, late 2021, going into 2022. And so 2022 was a complete year of upheaval for me. And so when I got into 2023, I called it my year of questioning my inheritance. So many CS leaders step into organizations. I mean, some people had the fortune of working with startups and building up, but I stepped into a pretty mature organization. And some things were working and some things were not. And so I really spent a lot of time questioning what we were doing and really trying to create alignment between what we say we're doing and what we think we're doing and what's actually happening. And so this has been a year for me for reevaluating milestone moments in our customer journey, improving some practices, sharpening the skills of my team to be responsive to their commercial roles. We also added some expansion responsibilities to our plate. We were really just trying to make sure we're focused on what we need to do to retain and grow the business. And while I wouldn't necessarily change anything, I obviously would wish for better economic stability. But I think from a CS perspective, you have to be looking for very small and incremental changes to continue to move your work forward.
I want to ask you, because you mentioned that you are working in this moment where you took a role in CS organizations, which was mature enough. Is it better to work in a CS organization, which is in a startup environment, and you have the chance to lay out the foundation? Or would you prefer working in more mature? I know that each and everyone has its pros and cons, but I want to know what's your take.
So for me, I can't judge it necessarily of which one is better or not. I have not had the experience working in a startup environment. It's not that it's not something I wouldn't consider in my career. It's just not been what my path has been. I think there's obviously benefits to being able to think through the processes that you want to build and practices. I question whether or not in every CS organization in a startup environment that necessarily happens, because I think there's always this sort of delayed sense of when you think you need a role or a function at a particular time. And I know we have a question about that a little bit later. So I don't know that I'm necessarily equipped to judge what's better, but either way, coming into any organization, new or otherwise, evaluation as a process is super clear. You don't want to just jump in and start acting. I would give advice for all CS leaders: listen, sit in on calls, talk to customers, understand the product really well and how it's serving your marketing, your space. Because no matter where you are, whether you're in a mature organization like I am or in a startup situation, you're going to have to do some building. And so you have to figure out which blocks you're going to spend your time in doing that work.
I want to talk about planning for this year. What are your main strategies for developing a solid CS plan? And how are you handling this planning phase?
Okay. So for my organization, for so many people, I understand that January is the start of a new fiscal year, but we work on a fiscal year of July to June. So technically for us, it's halftime. What we're doing right now is assessing where we are towards our revenue targets so that we can adapt our strategy to address our gap to goal and refine our go-to-market strategies as it relates to our customer success work. So at the beginning of the year in July, we kicked off the year with what I call a renewals boot camp. My team is both service and commercially focused. So we spent time really identifying our commercial priorities and our plays. We developed our price increase strategy. We've had to adapt and refine that based on product improvements. So we really try to leverage what is coming out of the product go-to-market space to build and support our renewal strategy and retention strategy, as well as growth and price increase. So we've spent time doing that. And so this time of year is really about refining and adjusting. Additionally, we've spent a lot of time this year on a couple of different projects to, once again, look at our customer journey. The customer journey sort of existed because I stepped into this role 2 years ago. So we've been spending time, as I said, what do we say is happening on paper? What are we doing? And what is actually happening? The balance between those two, and looking for those gaps and where processes or flows are broken. We spent a lot of time working on reevaluating the way we kick off partnerships with our implementation team. We have refined one of our core best practice and strategy milestone moments with partners to reorient that to really focus on driving adoption of our product in our partner base. And so we're going to continue to make those refinements around milestone moments. So that's a big focus. From a people perspective, this year, a period of really big upheaval as well. And so I have a new team that's been in place now for about a year with a level of continuity and stability. And so this has been a year focused on, as an organization writ large, not just my part of the org, psychological safety, really building good upskilling practices around sales skills for our team. So we've been focused on persona-based conversations, permission-based selling, relationship building with our customers in a way that really gets to not just being friendly. Obviously, everybody wants to be liked, but how am I relating to that customer based on their role and what is important for them to deliver impact within their organization based on how our product can support that work, right? So we've spent a lot of time doing that, and we'll continue to do so. So we're focusing internally in how we work with one another as a customer success team, how we work with our cross-functional peers in product and marketing and sales. So that's been a big focus as well. So we're going to continue to do that work. Operationally, 2023 was a big year of cleanup, getting our data clean, making sure we had good reporting and visualization, that everybody knew where we were in regards to our revenue, as well as our service obligations related to our partnerships. And so because my team is two-footed with service and sales, I understand that not all customer success organizations own revenue. We have a bit of an obligation to work in our sales CRM, but we understand that not all sales CRMs serve us as customer success teams to be able to do our service work. So last year, we had a customer success CRM that we retired. And what that allowed us to do was really get clean and focused on where we were in the sales CRM. And now we're adopting a new CS CRM. And it's got us focused on the right workflows that make sure that our customer success team properly adopts this technology. So really excited about continuing to clean things up operationally, look for broken processes, clean up workarounds so that we're able to really focus on the work at hand for our customers.
When we are mapping out our CS strategy, we are somehow aiming for the winning formula. But sometimes even the best laid plans can go south. What are some early warning signs that a CS strategy might be heading for a stumble?
So I empathize with every CS leader out there because we're always looking for that thing, right, that makes a difference in our business. And one of the most positive aspects of the customer success community is that we're so giving. Everybody is so willing to share in this community what they're doing, just like we're doing here today. But sometimes we can really find ourselves just overwhelmed with a lot of ideas and strategies and solutions. So while hearing what people are doing is really important, I think that when people stumble, it's because they haven't really become attuned to their product, their customers, listening to their customers, listening to the market and what their competition is doing, and listening to their team about what they're experiencing in their customer interactions. And so there are a lot of warning signs, whether your customer success strategy is off track. That could be if you're doing CSAT scores or NPS. There could be a drop in customer engagement. Obviously, looking at your product usage rates is a concerning factor as well. We know that renewals are lagging indicators, and so we got to get ahead of that. But paying attention to increases in unresolved support tickets, we're working on a similar project to that right now of really getting a good, clear indication of what's happening with our support flows could result in maybe a greater need for product conversations that will make you more competitive in the market. So monitoring those indicators really helps you to identify problems early in the process. And for me, what I think has been super critical in making sure that we're staying ahead of challenges has been my interactions with my cross-functional teams. So working very closely and having an opportunity for customer success to influence the product roadmap has been important for us to then be able to deliver that back to our customers in value and new enhancements. And then really working very closely with the sales team who has a different ear to the ground in the acquisition market. And that's helped to make sure that we're refining our go-to-market strategy with our partners.
What are the common challenges you faced when joining different CS teams, and how did you overcome those?
I think the biggest challenge is prioritization. There are so many things that you could do. When you get into a space, you know, a new CS leader, you're hearing everybody's challenges and pain points. And I think really focusing on what is going to be priority and have the greatest impact is the biggest challenge that I think that CS teams and CS leaders can deal with, because it can be very easy to be focused on the small thing and not really looking at what's happening with your processes and what you say is your delivery expectations for your customers. And so CS leaders have to listen to all of those ideas, pull them in, and make some decision-making processes that are inclusive and listening to their teams. But it's really up to CS leaders to lay out a vision for what they're doing and for their focus priorities so that they can move there. And so for my work this year, I've really worked on identifying those core priorities, really looking at our milestone moments for our customer journey. And I was really fortunate when I came into this space that my leadership had a really clear vision for me. So I think it's important for CS leaders to coordinate with their leadership, make sure that they're on the same page and steering the ship in the same direction. So, you know, that first year really focused on sustainability and quality. How are we really improving the quality of our service? And that allowed us to get into a space of innovation and growth for not just the CS team, but our entire org. And it doesn't work without really strong coordination, and communication between teams with sales and marketing and implementation and support. It's really complex, but I think that's probably the biggest challenge within the organization is to not get caught in the silos and think that, you know, you're the one thing that is going to move things forward. It really takes a lot of interaction and coordination across teams.
You mentioned earlier something about tools. You mentioned it indirectly about working in the sales CRM. I want to ask you, how important are the tools and the technology, or having the right tools and technology in the success overall of a CS team?
You know, having a good tech stack is really important. And sometimes it's not about having all the bells and whistles and every tool out there, because there's lots of things to choose from, but it's also making sure that the tech tools you have, you're really maximizing the value and the use case of it. So we strip down to our sort of core foundational tool, and we're really trying to figure out how we're adding on and layering in the right tools at the right time and how we use that to be able to support the work that we do. I think it's a really interesting experience for customer success leaders to lead their teams through an adoption of a product because they're actually sitting in the seat of a customer in that way. And so I've had an opportunity to implement a couple of really core and central technology tools in a couple of different organizations. And the work that it takes to figure out how to get your team to not reject a tool and stay in their own little ways that they've worked around to figure out how to get their jobs done. You've got to get your teams to make changes. And it really is an eye-opening experience for them to translate into their CS work with their customers. So this has been a year of us really getting clean with where we are in our sales CRM. We're now layering in a new CS CRM tool. Sometimes I think when people think about integration, you really focus on whether or not systematically and technically do they talk to one another, but it's also got to integrate with the way that you work. And so we've really been taking the time to think about where things are placed on the screen. How many clicks is it going to take to do that thing? Because if it's going to take too many clicks, over time your CSMs are going to step away from the tool. And how do we get to the right expectations and then build practice with the work that is then having impact on the outcomes that you want and giving you the data and information that you want?
In your journey through different organizations, who are your main partners in driving CS? And how do you build these key alliances?
My main partners first start with my team, and I have to be really good and solid with the team that I'm working with. I'm coordinating really well with my leadership, making sure that I'm radiating up my needs. But on a cross-functional basis, my core partners are product. We have a very extensive implementation process, so I work very closely with my implementation teams and leadership. And marketing, we have a dedicated customer success marketing, so that's important. And then along with that, my revenue and operations team. So across those, that takes a lot of really good coordination and role definition and clarity. I've worked in other spaces where I didn't have as many hands. And so you have to really let people go to do the parts that they're expert in, because they're definitely going to get it done faster than you. But I'm really proud over the past 2 years, especially in the way that we interact with product. We have a dedicated product review board that our teams work on. Customer success is represented on that board. They have influence on the different enhancements that get pushed up to our development teams around the roadmap. And as a result, over the past 2 years, we've been able to go back to our customer base and not only deliver innovations that we already intended to do in response to the market and what our product needs, but we've been able to deliver back on product enhancements based on customer feedback. You guys have been asking us for this, and because we're listening, we've been able to turn that around. And that's a direct relationship to how well we work with our product teams.
When it comes to customer success teams, what roles do you think are must-haves? And when do those roles usually pop up as a company grows?
I've not worked in a startup environment, so I don't necessarily know that I can speak to, hey, when's the right time for this role? Mm-hmm. But the reality is that from the minute that an organization sells a customer, you need implementation, you need support, you need revenue management, you need marketing enablement and customer education. And whether that looks like a person or a tool or a process, those are all things you need. And so I think sometimes organizations wait to think when they need to hire for the person. By that point, you've already not been supporting those partners with all of the facets. So I wouldn't say I'm going to host a party and wait to order food when the people get here. I know I'm having a party. I need to have food before they get here. So I think it's really important to think about those core areas. And depending on the complexity of the implementation of your tool, that might be a team, that might be a function or a process, revenue operations, customer marketing, CS enablement, and your internal teams, and then customer education, I think are all important functions to consider.
I think this is a very awesome analogy. It's very easy to relate to. It was very well explained. Thank you for that. What KPIs do you prioritize for your team? And I'm also curious on what are the KPIs that you are reporting to your leadership team?
Yeah, on a core basis, because our teams are revenue responsible, commercially responsible, we have revenue targets that we track to that are both net and gross revenue retention. In addition to that, we focus on what we call contract GPA. So we're really focused on the health of our contracts by way of pricing, term, payment, all of those different things. So each deal that our team members process is graded. It has a scale. We have a literal, like a report card, 4.0, 3.0 for different measures for our team to understand how well they're managing a contract. And we've been talking a lot about how we negotiate contracts with partners and what's that sort of give and get between the two. So that's a new indicator for me in this organization, but I think really forces us to not just think about the dollars and cents, but the structure of the partnership that we're entering into, and where if I can get longer term, I might have an opportunity to give a little bit on price or create some flexibility in some different ways, because then I know I'm not going to be managing that contract year over year in the work that we do. So we've really been focusing this year on extending multi-year and focused on a really strong price increase strategy that supports the investments we're making in the product. In addition to that, on the service side, we focus on what we call impact interactions. So we've identified our customer journey and the milestone moments, and there's a lot of different interactions that teams have with a partner. And then we've said these are what we call qualifying events for impact interactions. And we're not focused on volume, but we're focused on penetration across their partner base. So they have a threshold that they have to hit of meeting with a certain number of partners with the right types of value interactions that support the work. And we've had some statistical analysis about where partners who have had those interactions versus who haven't, how that impacts their renewal expectations and rates. And then obviously we look very closely at adoption behaviors and product performance. And so this year as well, part of that operational and systems cleanup is going to allow us to track to that a little bit better, to know that the best practices that we're telling customers about how to use our product to gain value, so that we can make a connection between that and how it impacts their usage of the product.
What does a CS team need in order to be performing above expectations?
First of all, I think that a CS team needs a really healthy team environment where people understand what their role is and where their contributions have impact. I'm really thankful to work in an organization that looks at employee performance across the organization in two ways. You have your goals, and because we're a commercial team, our goals are very quantifiable, right? They're numbers-based metrics and revenue metrics. So that's a portion of how we review and understand the work that we do. But we also work in a world of what we call competencies. The goals are what you have to do. The competencies are how we want you to do it. And we focus on competencies like communication, collaboration, maintaining operations and procedures. And so what has been great for us as a team is we know what good communication is supposed to look and sound like, but we focus on what is good communication in this team, in this role, for this product, in this organization. And we spent the time really identifying how we want to work with one another. And we have agreement. I think that it's simple enough to just say, here's your goal, go do it. Or here's your product, go support it. But if you don't have a really good shared understanding of what good looks like in those different measures, I think that's where you create opportunity for interpretation, deviance, change, and then you're not all measuring the same thing. So I think a really clear vision and clear expectations and role clarity are super important from the start. So I've spent a lot of time this year focused on building my team, focusing on the skills they want, but also just knowing them as people. So I think creating a good community is important for any organization, in CS especially. Beyond that, I think that, really clear goals that are transparent. So this improved on it each year, but everybody knows exactly not only what their goal is, but what units comprise it. There's no lack of clarity in how their goal was created, so they can trust it. And they know exactly what are the pieces to the puzzle to help them get to that space. On a day-to-day basis, I think it's providing them with the support and the communication that they need to go and be effective in the conversations with their customer, building them up and trusting them to be able to make those in-the-spot decisions. We've also spent the past 2 years actually creating space of autonomy for our team members to make decisions. Nobody wants to have to be on a call with a customer and say, let me go check on that. Let me go ask somebody. So we've let our teams know, like, this is your ceiling, this is your floor. And then we've created processes. And so it's allowed us to also clean up a lot of back and forth inefficiencies and create a lot of trust in their ability to make the right decision in the moments. So I think you could also round this out with a lot of different tools and things like that. But I think it's really clarity of purpose and function and role, good community building, and creating space for them to go be the person you hired them to be.
Thinking about skills and competences, I want to ask you what makes a difference between a great CS team and a good one?
I would just reiterate those things. It's about transparency, clarity, good follow-up and feedback in the work that they're doing. So, celebrating when you need to celebrate, encouraging, and also respecting the fact. I think one of the biggest challenges about customer success is that in the work that we do, it's very easy to feel like the weight of the world is on your shoulders. And that I won this partner, I lost this partner. It's a lot of highs and lows. I lost a partner today. And it's like, you didn't lose a partner today. We lost a partner today. You didn't do it all by yourself in any way, shape, or form, even when it feels that way. You got to know that you got to take your wins, and it's the team behind you supporting you when you take those losses and challenges. So I think really communicating with your team that you are supportive of them. I think creating good, clear vision is what makes the difference between a great CS team and a good one, because without good vision and intention, there's tons of things you can be doing. When I first stepped into CS, I had a leader tell me, she says, we're not want for activity. So are you doing the right thing at the right time to make a difference? And we can all think we know what that is, but it's where we have that shared win and know that when we do this thing at this time, this happens. And are we all doing that in a certain amount of coordination? Not cloning one another, but like maximizing the value of the right activity at the right time, I think is really important.
You mentioned about doing the right thing at the right time, but we aren't always in this situation. So I want to also talk about the mistakes. And I want to ask you, what are some typical CS mistakes that often lead to failure or underperformance?
I think not setting a clear strategy from the very beginning. So spending time, I think you can give your team a number and say, here's your goal. It's like, it's clear. I know what this number means. But if you haven't really taken the time to break it down and say, okay, what are the steps and processes for me to get to that? You can very quickly find yourself behind that number because you haven't necessarily assessed the value of the different deals and what are the building blocks that get you there or the different activities to get you there. So I think where I've had struggles is sometimes where you're going too fast and you make assumptions of what people know and understand. I work with a really young team from a commercial responsibility. This is an early career CS role that I work with. And there's a certain amount of knowledge that you gain through experience, and thinking that your team can just experience their way through growth is a really big mistake. And so I think it's really important to identify what are the right skills that need to be used and train your team on those skills. So if you want them to be able to mitigate risk effectively, you got to talk through what are the processes and strategies for managing a risk conversation. What are the right skills and discovery questions to be able to get at an upsell opportunity? Those things don't happen just by accident all the time. Sometimes they can. We can work our way into really good results, but really equipping your team with the skills that you've acquired as a leader over time. We don't have to wait for them to have 5-10 years of experience to be good at things. We can teach them those strategies and skills early on.
Let me share with us one mistake that you did in your role that actually turned out in a valuable learning experience.
In a previous role, not this one that I'm in, this is where I had my learning experience on adopting a tech tool. I think you immediately get a new tool and you say, okay, like this is the tool, this is how it works, this is what I want you to go do. And I didn't spend the time really, I think we tried to set expectations before we thought about how this tool managed in our flow. And after a couple of situations where I was like, okay, guys, this is how we need it to do. But then they're on the ground and they're the ones using it. And they're like, but yeah, it doesn't do this or that or whatever. I didn't anticipate misconceptions, even though, as a former educator, we know that those are the things we need to do, like anticipate how this message is going to be received by my team. It created a little friction around the tool and the product. And I had to manage through some pushback on that and then sort of take a step back. And then what we ended up doing was taking that tool and just doing sessions after obviously getting base level product training. We just spent time like, tell me, how is this working for you? What are your aha moments? And let's set some base level expectations instead of requirements. And then people have the ability to either rise to that expectation, overperform on that expectation, or they might need some support to get to it. But it isn't you're doing it, you're not doing it, but we're really creating opportunities for progression of growth. And I've taken that lesson and applied it to everything that I do in helping to upskill and build my team. Where are you in this moment and what is it that gets you to that next level? So when we're talking about forecasting, oftentimes our teams were very conservative forecasters. They would forecast low because they're trying to be conservative and say that too much is going to happen. And so we had to spend some time saying, under forecasting is just as problematic as over forecasting, right? Either way, as a business, I don't have the predictability that I need to know what's going to happen in the business. And so how do we create opportunities for people to see gradual and stepped improvement and not necessarily feeling like you have to go from 0 to 100? And so that lesson in my team adopting tech tools, I've applied that and how I approach any new learning that my team is undertaking. And when I create space to listen to them and hear how it's working, and not say, here's what you're going to get and this is what we're going to do. I think it's really about listening to your team and figuring out how they're going to manage through it, but also creating that really clear expectation that we've invested in something that we believe is going to be supportive of our work.
As we wrap up, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the future. What are your predictions for the customer success industry this year? Are there any trends or changes you foresee that we should all be keeping an eye on?
What I've been hearing in spaces, even though I've always worked in a space where I've handled service and revenue, increasingly we're still hearing that question of, should customer success teams manage revenue? Obviously, there's different levels of complexities and products and implementations that might mean you need different support teams to be able to manage that process. But to not have some sort of accountability to whether or not that customer stays or grows, I think is super important. And as organizations think about taking on that responsibility, or for the organizations that have always had it, they should be focused on how to upskill their teams and giving them the same sales, risk mitigation, and negotiation skills that our sales teams, our acquisition teams get. So I think that's number one, is really figuring out the role of revenue and service and how those functions and actions go hand in hand to influence one another. Secondly, I think that obviously everybody's talking about AI, and that's going to continue to be a conversation, and how we're using AI to not only enhance our workflows and how we get things done and how we make templates, all the different things that CS leaders need. But it's been an interesting thing for me to watch how AI is influencing our product. So I think it'll be really curious at how AI can deliver some product enhancements that can then further support the customer success conversations and retention of customers. And then, as always, scale, scale, scale. Everybody is always trying to figure out, how do I do more with less? And I think it's not about more. Once again, right thing, right time that has the right impact, I think is going to be the real key. And so I think the CS organizations that excel in the next year are not necessarily going to be the ones that are focused on, how do I trim this back and do this? It's like, what are the right things that I need to be doing? And what are the tools I need to get it done? Or the personnel that I need to get it done to be able to support my partners and support the business.
Keishla, it's been wonderful having this conversation with you, and thank you for joining our Candid Leader Insights series and sharing your valuable insights with us. And as we continue into 2024, I'm excited to see how your predictions for the CS industry unfold. Best wishes for the year ahead.
Thank you, Irina.